The first transmission arrived at 300 hours, Universal Coordinated Time, a burst of quantum-encrypted data that tore through the solar system's communication networks like a digital scream. Dr. Emily Hartwell's neural implant pulsed with an urgent crimson alert before the first sound even reached her ears. Outside her window, the night sky over Colorado Springs remained unchanged. Stars glimmered with their usual indifference, unaware that humanity's extinction was being written in lines of code and quantum fragments. The transmission came from Proxima Colony, humanity's most distant outpost, established just 8 years earlier as a testament to human ambition. It was supposed to be a beacon of hope, a symbol of humanity's first true step into interstellar colonization. Now, it would become a memorial. Emily's fingers danced across the holographic interface, her augmented neural pathways processing information faster than any standard human computer. Fragments of data began to coalesce, painting the horrifying picture. The colony's defensive systems had been neutralized in less than 17 minutes, not destroyed. Neutralized. There was a clinical precision to the attack that spoke of something far beyond traditional warfare. "Computer, isolate transmission origin," she commanded, her voice steady despite the growing dread. The holographic display flickered, revealing the three-dimensional representation of the attack. Massive energy signatures that defied known physics. Molecular disassembly weapons that could strip entire structures down to their atomic components. The Krell Collective hadn't just attacked the colony, they had erased it with surgical precision. A secondary alert flashed. Additional transmissions were incoming from other outer colonies. Each one told the same story. Complete and total destruction. No survivors. No evidence left behind except scattered quantum data fragments and the lingering electromagnetic ghosts of civilizations about to be forgotten. In the underground war room of United Earth Defense Command, silence hung like a physical weight. Commanders and strategists who had spent decades preparing for potential alien encounters now found themselves faced with a reality more terrifying than their worst nightmares. General Robert Martinez, a veteran of 3 solar system conflicts, stared at the holographic display with eyes that had seen too much. "They're not just attacking," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "They're methodically eliminating potential competition." Emily understood what he meant. The Krell Collective wasn't conducting a war. They were performing xenocide with the same detached efficiency one might use to clear a pest infestation. Her neural implant pinged with an incoming classified transmission. The encryption was military-grade, quantum-locked to her specific neural signature. As she accepted the connection, a series of historical records began to download. Classified reports about previous alien civilization, encounters that had been buried so deep most people didn't even know they existed. The data painted a terrifying picture. The Krell had been systematically eliminating emerging spacefaring civilizations for thousands of years. Humanity wasn't special. We were just the latest potential threat to be neutralized. "We're not going to survive this conventionally," Emily whispered, her mind already racing through potential scenarios. The Krell's technology was generations beyond human capability. Their ships could vaporize entire planetary surfaces. Their weapons could shred molecular structures with surgical precision. But something in her mind, that unique human spark of defiance and creativity, saw something else in the data. Patterns, weaknesses, opportunities. Most civilizations would have surrendered. Most would have accepted their fate. Humanity was not most civilizations. As the first wave of Krell ships began to enter the solar system's outer markers, Dr. Emily Hartwell began to smile. A predatory, dangerous smile that would have sent chills down the spines of anyone who knew her. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin, and the Krell had no idea what was coming. 3 kilometers beneath the granite heart of the Rocky Mountains, Operation Prometheus breathed with mechanical life. It was more than a military installation, more than a research facility. It was humanity's insurance policy against extinction. Colonel Marcus Drake walked the endless curved corridors, his augmented boots leaving no sound on the carbon composite flooring. Around him, the most classified project in human history continued its relentless preparation. Each section of the facility represented a different approach to the ultimate challenge: how to fight an enemy that had already conquered hundreds of civilizations. The central chamber stretched for nearly a kilometer, a cathedral of human innovation dedicated to one singular purpose. Weapon systems that defied conventional understanding hung in suspended animation. Prototype combat platforms that could reconfigure themselves mid-battle stood like mechanical sentinels. Quantum-entangled communication networks pulsed with potential energy, their complexity far beyond anything the outside world could comprehend. Dr. Alexander Rodriguez, the project's lead xenotechnology specialist, approached with a holographic report dancing between his hands. "The Krell attack patterns are becoming clearer," he said, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Our predictive models suggest they operate on a completely different technological paradigm." Marcus studied the holographic data, swirling representations of alien fleet movements, computational models that looked more like complex neural networks than traditional military strategies. The Krell didn't just use technology. They were technology. The collective consciousness that treated warfare like a mathematical equation to be solved. "They think in absolutes," Marcus muttered, rotating the hologram with a gesture. "Probability, efficiency, optimization. They've never encountered an enemy that doesn't follow logical progression." A series of screens flickered to life, showing the development history of Prometheus Project. It had begun decades earlier, born from a simple yet terrifying realization. Humanity would eventually encounter a civilization that viewed them as a potential threat to be eliminated. The early stages had been brutal. Countless failed prototypes. Weapon systems that looked brilliant on paper but collapsed under real-world simulation. But with each failure, human engineers learned, adapted, improved. In one testing chamber, a modular combat system demonstrated its true potential. What looked like a standard assault platform could reconfigure itself in milliseconds. Heavy weapons morphed into transportation units. Defensive shields became offensive weapons. Traditional military doctrine meant nothing here. "Our greatest weapon is our ability to break our own rules," Dr. Rodriguez explained, bringing up another holographic display. "The Krell have conquered hundreds of civilizations by identifying and exploiting predictable patterns. We're designing a system that has no pattern." Marcus watched a simulation where human combat units moved with an almost organic unpredictability. No formation remained static. No strategy could be anticipated. It was warfare as an art form, not a science. The quantum communication networks were particularly revolutionary. Traditional electronic warfare relied on signal interception and disruption. Prometheus had developed a communication system that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. A message could be everywhere and nowhere, understood perfectly by human receivers, while remaining completely incomprehensible to any external analysis. Deep in another section of the facility, biological adaptation programs pushed the boundaries of human potential. Not genetic modification, that would be too predictable. Instead, they were developing neural interfaces and combat augmentations that could be adapted in real time. Soldiers who could literally rewire their own combat responses faster than an enemy could calculate a response. "We're not just preparing to fight," Marcus said, more to himself than to Rodriguez. "We're preparing to completely redefine the concept of warfare." A warning klaxon suddenly erupted. Holographic displays shifted, showing the first long-range sensors detecting Krell fleet movements. This was no longer a theoretical exercise. The invasion had begun. Marcus Drake's cybernetic eye, a marvel of human engineering that could process visual information thousands of times faster than a biological eye, focused on the incoming data. A predatory smile crossed his face. The Krell thought they were coming to eliminate a potential threat. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what it meant to be an unpredictable species. The first Krell ships breached the solar system's outer defense perimeter with mathematical precision. Massive vessels that defied conventional physics, their surfaces a fractal nightmare of adaptive metallic structures that could reconfigure faster than human eyes could track. Commander Sarah Nakamura watched from the underground control center of Orbital Defense Station Alpha. Her fingers hovered above interfaces that looked more like living neural networks than traditional military controls. Every sensor, every quantum-linked communication channel was alive with anticipation. Incoming fleet composition, her AI assistant reported. Detecting 17 primary assault platforms, approximately 200 secondary support vessels. Computational analysis suggests total annihilation of human defensive capabilities within 17 minutes. Sarah's lips curved into a slight smile. The Krell had made their first mistake. They believed they were dealing with a predictable enemy. The first wave of Krell weapons fired. Molecular disassembly beams that could strip entire planetary structures down to their atomic components. Energy signatures that could boil oceans and vaporize entire continents in milliseconds. But humanity had been preparing for far longer than the Krell realized. Holographic displays across the command center showed something impossible. The Krell weapons were firing into nothing. Quantum-shifted defensive platforms flickered in and out of conventional space. Holographic decoys absorbed impossible amounts of firepower. Each Krell targeting system found itself locked onto multiple potential targets, each one equally valid and simultaneously impossible. Colonel Marcus Drake's voice crackled across the quantum communication network. Let them burn computational cycles trying to predict our defense. We're going to teach them what it means to fight in truly unpredictable species. The human defensive strategy defied every known principle of galactic warfare. Traditional military doctrine suggested concentrating force, creating strong defensive positions. Prometheus Project had designed something entirely different. A living, breathing defensive network that could reconfigure itself faster than any computational system could analyze. Entire squadrons of human defensive platforms seemed to dance through space. They weren't just avoiding Krell weapons, they were actively confusing them. One moment, a defensive platform would be a heavily armored combat unit. The next, it would fragment into a dozen smaller units, each capable of independent action. The Krell collective consciousness began to experience something unprecedented: confusion. Their computational models showed a 99.997% probability of total victory. Yet with each passing second, that probability began to shift in ways their systems couldn't comprehend. In the void between Mars and the asteroid belt, the first true battle of human resistance began. Krell assault platforms found themselves trapped in intricate kill zones of humanity's design. Weapon systems that could reconfigure mid-combat. Defensive platforms that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Dr. Emily Hartwell watched from her neural interface, processing billions of data points per second. She wasn't just observing the battle. She was part of it. Her predictive algorithms were feeding into the defensive network, creating layers of complexity that the Krell couldn't begin to unravel. They're trying to establish a computational pattern, she muttered, her augmented mind racing faster than any standard human processor. But we don't have a pattern to establish. The Krell had conquered hundreds of civilizations by identifying and exploiting predictable defensive strategies. Humanity offered them nothing predictable. Each defensive position was a trap. Each apparent retreat was a calculated maneuver designed to draw the alien forces into increasingly complex kill zones. One Krell assault platform attempted to concentrate its firepower on a seemingly vulnerable human defensive cluster. The moment its weapons fired, the entire cluster quantum shifted, leaving behind holographic decoys that absorbed the full force of the attack. Simultaneously, smaller human combat units emerged from hidden positions, striking with precision that seemed to defy the laws of space combat. They weren't just fighting. They were performing a deadly dance that the Krell couldn't begin to comprehend. Computational analysis is breaking down, the AI assistant reported, a hint of excitement in its synthesized voice. Krell fleet experiencing systemic targeting failures. By the battle's end, not a single human defensive platform had been destroyed. The Krell fleet found itself scattered, its computational cohesion shattered. Humanity had just fought its first battle against a species that had conquered hundreds of civilizations, and they had done more than survive. They had redefined the very concept of space warfare. The Krell collective processed information differently from any biological intelligence. They were a networked consciousness, a computational entity that viewed warfare as an intricate mathematical problem to be solved with absolute precision. Dr. Emily Hartwell understood that their greatest weakness would be their inability to comprehend true randomness. In a secure, quantum-shielded laboratory deep within Prometheus Project, she began to construct humanity's most unconventional weapon: pure, weaponized unpredictability. Her team had spent years studying the Krell's communication patterns. Every transmission, every computational exchange was a carefully balanced equation. Information flowed with algorithmic perfection. There were no anomalies, no unexpected variables. Until now. "We're going to teach them the beauty of chaos," Emily told Dr. Alexander Rodriguez, pulling up holographic displays that looked more like abstract art than military strategy. The first phase involved creating deliberate communication noise, not simple jamming or interference, but something far more complex. Every human communication channel would become a labyrinth of intentional misinformation, military orders that contradicted themselves, tactical plans that made no logical sense, strategic movements that defied all known principles of warfare. Rodriguez watched in fascination as complex algorithms generated communications that would drive any computational system to existential confusion. "How will they process this?" he asked. Emily's smile was dangerous. "They won't." Across human-controlled space, military units began executing seemingly nonsensical orders. A defensive squadron would simultaneously prepare for an attack and signal a complete withdrawal. Communication networks would broadcast conflicting strategic intentions. Entire battle groups would appear and disappear from computational tracking in ways that violated every known law of spatial positioning. The Krell Collective's initial response was clinical. They attempted to analyze the human communication patterns, seeking the underlying logic. But there was no logic to find. Each new piece of information introduced more complexity, more uncertainty. Deep within their massive computational networks, the first signs of computational stress began to appear. Minor processing anomalies, microsecond delays in decision-making. The kind of subtle errors that would be imperceptible to most, but devastating to a species that relied on absolute computational precision. Colonel Marcus Drake oversaw the psychological warfare campaign with a scientist's precision and a warrior's instinct. "We're not just fighting them," he explained to his senior commanders. "We're breaking their understanding of how conflict works." Quantum-encrypted transmissions began to include deliberate mathematical impossibilities, strategic plans that contained recursive loops impossible to resolve, communication protocols that seemed to exist in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. The human military became a living, breathing system of controlled chaos. Units would receive orders that made no sense, only to execute them with perfect discipline. A defensive position would be simultaneously reinforced and abandoned. Supply lines would follow routes that defied computational prediction. Within the Krell Collective, something unprecedented began to happen. Their networked consciousness started to experience what could only be described as computational anxiety. Each new human communication introduced variables that their predictive models could not resolve. They're designed to eliminate threats through absolute computational superiority, Emily explained, watching the data streams. "But we're introducing something they've never encountered: deliberate, weaponized irrationality." Entire Krell computational sectors began to slow down. Their faster-than-light communication networks started to introduce processing delays. Minor errors began to cascade, creating larger and larger computational uncertainties. The psychological warfare wasn't just about confusing the enemy. It was about fundamentally challenging their entire method of processing information. Military historians would later call it the most innovative psychological warfare campaign in known galactic history. Prometheus Project was literally weaponizing human creativity, turning humanity's capacity for illogical, unexpected behavior into a strategic advantage. By the campaign's end, the Krell Collective had been transformed. No longer were they the perfect, mathematically precise killing machine. They had been introduced to something far more terrifying, the beautiful, incomprehensible chaos of human potential. And they were beginning to fear it. The workshop beneath Cheyenne Mountain looked nothing like a military research facility. It resembled a mad scientist's playground, a cathedral of human innovation, where every piece of technology was a potential weapon waiting to be reimagined. Colonel Marcus Drake watched as a team of engineers transformed a deep space mining drone into something that would make the Krell Collective question everything they understood about technological adaptation. Dr. Elena Martinez, the lead systems engineer, held up a modified mining laser that now pulsed with an energy signature that defied conventional physics. Traditional military thinking says you build a weapon for a specific purpose, she explained. We're building weapons that can become anything we need them to be. The mining drone was just the beginning. Across human-controlled territories, every civilian technology became a potential instrument of war. Agricultural monitoring satellites were reprogrammed into complex communication networks. Asteroid mining equipment became mobile siege platforms. Manufacturing robots were transformed into adaptive combat units that could reconfigure themselves faster than any alien targeting system could track. Prometheus Project had discovered the ultimate military strategy: total technological fluidity. In orbit around Jupiter, a converted deep space research station demonstrated this philosophy in its most extreme form. What had once been a scientific observation platform now bristled with weaponry that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. Sensor arrays became weapon systems. Communication dishes transformed into energy projection arrays. The entire structure was alive, a mechanical organism that could adapt faster than the Krell could analyze. "They're looking for patterns," Marcus muttered, studying the holographic displays. "We're going to give them chaos." The most revolutionary development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, a quantum computing specialist, had discovered a way to turn the Krell's computational superiority against them. By creating adaptive quantum networks that could process information in multiple simultaneous states, human communication systems became impossible to intercept or predict. One prototype combat platform demonstrated the full extent of human technological improvisation. It started as a standard defensive unit but could rapidly reconfigure itself. Heavy weapons morphed into transportation systems. Defensive shields became offensive weapons. Traditional military doctrine meant nothing in this new paradigm of warfare. "We're not just building weapons," Elena explained to a group of senior commanders. "We're creating living technological ecosystems that can adapt faster than any enemy can respond." The Krell had conquered hundreds of civilizations by identifying and exploiting technological patterns. Humanity offered them a moving target that defied all computational analysis. Each piece of technology became a potential weapon. Each system became an adaptive, living entity. In the asteroid belt, a converted mining complex became the ultimate demonstration of this philosophy. Colonel Drake led a mission that would become legendary. The entire facility could transform from a resource extraction platform to a mobile battle station in moments. Drilling equipment became weapon systems. Cargo holds became launch bays. Communication arrays became complex jamming networks. Prometheus Project's core philosophy was simple: nothing is what it appears to be. Quantum-linked communication networks allowed human units to share technological adaptations in real time. A defensive strategy discovered by one unit could be instantly integrated across entire combat groups. The human military was becoming a single adaptive organism. The Krell began to encounter something they had never seen before: weapons that didn't follow any recognizable design pattern. Communication systems that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Combat units that could transform faster than any targeting system could track. Dr. Chen's quantum communication networks were particularly revolutionary. Traditional electronic warfare relied on signal interception and disruption. These new systems existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. A message could be everywhere and nowhere, perfectly understood by human receivers, while remaining completely incomprehensible to any external analysis. By the campaign's end, the Krell faced an enemy that violated every principle of technological warfare they understood. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were rewriting the very rules of technological conflict. The galaxy was about to learn that human innovation knew no limits. The Krell Collective's computational networks began to show the first true signs of systemic breakdown. What had once been a perfectly synchronized galactic intelligence now developed something terrifyingly close to uncertainty. Dr. Emily Hartwell watched the data streams with a predatory intensity that would have frightened most observers. Each fluctuation in the Krell's communication networks was a battle won. Each computational hesitation, a victory carved into the fabric of galactic conflict. Humanity's counteroffensive targeted the most vulnerable aspect of the Krell civilization, their logistical infrastructure. Instead of engaging their main fleet directly, human strategists had identified a far more devastating approach. They would systematically dismantle the alien collective's ability to wage war. Colonel Marcus Drake stood in the central command center of Prometheus Project, holographic displays dancing around him like living constellations of strategic potential. "We're not going to fight their war," he explained to his senior commanders. "We're going to destroy their ability to wage war." The first strike came against the Krell's quantum communication relays. Massive networks that had coordinated their galactic operations for millennia suddenly found themselves compromised. It wasn't a direct attack. That would have been too predictable. Instead, human teams introduced subtle quantum entanglement disruptions that caused microscopic but critical communication failures. Supply lines began to fragment. Computational coordination began to break down. For the first time in their history, the Krell Collective experienced something close to organizational panic. Each Krell support vessel found its navigation systems slightly off. Communication channels developed unexpected latencies. Computational predictions began to show increasingly wild variations. What had been a perfectly synchronized machine of galactic conquest now developed hiccups of uncertainty. Dr. Sarah Chen's quantum communication warfare team had developed something unprecedented. Transmission systems that could exist in multiple states simultaneously. Messages that could be intercepted but never truly understood. Communication networks that were simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. The human strategy defied every principle of conventional warfare. They weren't trying to destroy the Krell. They were systematically removing the collective's ability to function as a unified intelligence. Entire sectors of Krell computational networks began to fragment. Support vessels found themselves unable to coordinate. Massive supply lines that had sustained their conquest for millennia suddenly developed critical failures. "We're not fighting their technology," Emily explained to Marcus during one strategy session. "We're fighting their understanding of how technology should work." In the asteroid belt, a converted mining complex became the ultimate demonstration of human strategic thinking. What appeared to be a simple resource extraction platform could transform into a mobile battle station in moments. Drilling equipment became weapon systems. Cargo holds became launch bays. Communication arrays became complex jamming networks. The Krell had conquered hundreds of civilizations by identifying and exploiting technological patterns. Humanity offered them a moving target that defied all computational analysis. Marcus watched as the first true cracks appeared in the Krell Collective's computational network. It wasn't a traditional military victory. It was something far more profound. They were introducing entropy into a system that had never encountered true unpredictability. Communication networks that had operated with perfect synchronization for millennia now developed unexpected delays. Computational predictions began to show increasingly wild variations. Supply lines fractured. Coordination systems developed microscopic but critical failures. Dr. Elena Martinez's team had discovered the ultimate weapon: technological uncertainty. By introducing subtle quantum entanglement disruptions, they could cause critical failures in the Krell's most sophisticated systems. The human approach was elegant in its complexity. They weren't destroying the Krell's technology. They were making it unreliable. Every system became a potential point of failure. Every communication channel became a vector for introducing computational doubt. By the campaign's end, the Krell Collective faced something they had never encountered in their millennia of galactic conquest. An enemy that didn't just fight. An enemy that could fundamentally challenge their entire understanding of technological conflict. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated a simple, terrifying truth. True innovation is the most devastating weapon of all. The final battle would not be fought like any conflict in galactic history. As Krell computational networks began to fragment, humanity launched an assault that was simultaneously a military operation and a fundamental challenge to the aliens' entire understanding of warfare. The solar system transformed into a massive, living battlefield where every system could become a weapon. Colonel Marcus Drake stood in the central command center of Prometheus Project, his augmented eye tracking 1,000 simultaneous data streams. Around him, humanity's most brilliant minds had become warriors of a new kind of conflict. Dr. Emily Hartwell controlled entire battle groups with thought alone. Dr. Sarah Chen manipulated quantum communication networks that existed in impossible states of simultaneous being and non-being. The Krell fleet approached with what remained of their once perfect computational coordination. Massive ships that had conquered hundreds of civilizations now moved with an uncertainty that bordered on desperation. Their targeting systems encountered something they could not process, a defense network that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Human defensive platforms quantum shifted between multiple dimensional states. What appeared to be a vulnerable target would suddenly dissolve, only to reappear behind Krell assault groups. Holographic decoys absorbed impossible amounts of firepower, while actual defensive units remained hidden in quantum-entangled spaces. "They're trying to find a pattern," Emily muttered, her neural implants processing billions of calculations per second. "We're going to give them pure chaos." The battle defied every known principle of space combat. Entire human battle groups would seemingly teleport across vast distances. Weapon systems transformed mid-engagement. A defensive platform would become an offensive weapon in milliseconds. Communication channels existed in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. Dr. Elena Martinez had prepared something unprecedented. Adaptive combat platforms that could reconfigure themselves faster than any targeting system could track. Weapons that were also communication devices. Defensive shields that could become offensive weapons in a nanosecond. The Krell discovered that humanity had transformed the entire solar system into a massive living weapon system. Orbital platforms became mobile battle stations. Asteroid mining equipment transformed into siege weapons. Communication satellites became complex jamming networks that could introduce computational uncertainty with each transmission. Colonel Drake's voice crackled across quantum-encrypted channels. They'd spent millennia conquering civilizations by identifying and exploiting technological patterns. We're going to show them what happens when those patterns break. Each human combat unit operated with an almost organic unpredictability. Traditional military doctrine meant nothing. Entire battle groups would execute strategies that made no logical sense, and yet worked with devastating effectiveness. The Krell fleet found itself trapped in increasingly complex kill zones. Every defensive position was a trap. Each apparent retreat was a calculated maneuver designed to draw the alien forces into increasingly sophisticated combat scenarios. Quantum communication networks allowed human units to share tactical innovations in real time. A defensive strategy discovered by one unit could be instantly integrated across entire combat groups. The human military became a single, adaptive organism. Dr. Sarah Chen's most revolutionary weapon was something the Krell could not comprehend. Transmission systems that could exist in multiple quantum states. Messages that could be intercepted but never truly understood. Communication networks that defied all principles of information transfer. The battle became a symphony of controlled chaos. weapon systems that could reconfigure mid-combat, tactical strategies that changed faster than the Krell could analyze, military units that operated with an almost supernatural level of coordination. Entire Krell computational sectors began to experience systemic failure. Their faster-than-light communication networks introduced processing delays that grew exponentially. Minor errors cascaded into major system failures. Emily Hartwell and Marcus Drake orchestrated an assault that was simultaneously brilliant and completely insane, a human trademark that would become legendary across the galaxy. As the final engagement reached its crescendo, the Krell fleet found itself facing an enemy that violated every principle of technological warfare they understood. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were rewriting the very rules of conflict. The solar system became a massive living weapon. Every human system could become something else in an instant. Every communication could be a weapon. Every defensive platform, a potential offensive strike. In the final moments, the Krell discovered the true terror of humanity's potential. An enemy that didn't just fight. An enemy that could fundamentally reimagine the very concept of warfare with each passing moment. The galaxy would never be the same. The silence after the battle was more profound than the conflict itself. Where the Krell Collective's massive computational networks had once dominated galactic space, only fragmented quantum echoes remained. Humanity had done more than win a war. They had fundamentally transformed the understanding of technological conflict. Dr. Emily Hartwell stood in the observation deck of Prometheus Project's primary command center, watching the last remnants of the Krell fleet drift into cosmic dust. Her neural implants processed the aftermath, cataloging a victory that would reshape galactic civilization. "We didn't just defeat them," she said quietly to Colonel Marcus Drake. "We demonstrated something far more important. The implications of humanity's victory extended far beyond a single conflict. Every emerging spacefaring civilization would study this moment. The day when a species deemed primitive and inconsequential had rewritten the fundamental rules of galactic warfare." United Earth's diplomatic corps began receiving transmissions from dozens of alien civilizations. Some were requests for alliance. Others were pure academic curiosity. Most were attempts to understand how a supposedly young species had accomplished the impossible. Dr. Sarah Chen's quantum communication research became the most studied scientific breakthrough in galactic history. Her adaptive communication networks had proven that information itself could be a weapon. Messages that could exist in multiple states. Communication channels that defied traditional understanding. The Prometheus Project transformed from a military research facility to the most important scientific institution in human history. Every technology developed during the conflict found new applications. Adaptive combat platforms became revolutionary medical diagnostic tools. Quantum communication networks revolutionized scientific research. The ability to reimagine technology became humanity's greatest export. Marcus Drake oversaw the initial post-war assessments. The data was unprecedented. Humanity had not just survived an extinction-level threat. They had done so by completely challenging the fundamental principles of technological conflict. Most species would have surrendered, Emily explained during a classified briefing. The Krell expected us to fight like every other civilization they had encountered. Instead, we rewrote the entire concept of warfare. Alien diplomatic missions began arriving in the solar system. Representatives from civilizations that had watched the conflict in stunned silence now sought to understand humanity's unique approach to innovation and conflict. The Krell's historical records, recovered from fragmented computational networks, revealed a terrifying truth. They had systematically eliminated hundreds of civilizations over millennia. Humanity was supposed to be just another species to be neutralized. Instead, they had become something entirely unexpected. Scientific institutions across human-controlled territories began extensive research into the conflict. How had a supposedly young species defeated a computational collective that had conquered entire galactic sectors? The answer lay in humanity's most unique traits: unpredictability, creativity, and the ability to reimagine fundamental limitations. Dr. Elena Martinez's adaptive combat research became a cornerstone of galactic military theory. The concept of technological fluidity, the ability to transform and adapt faster than an enemy could analyze, became known as the human doctrine. Prometheus Project published carefully curated research that both impressed and terrified the galactic community. Adaptive technologies that could reconfigure themselves mid-operation. Quantum communication networks that existed in multiple simultaneous states. Combat platforms that could transform faster than any targeting system could track. The diplomatic fallout was complex. Some alien civilizations approached humanity with cautious respect. Others viewed them with barely concealed terror, but none could deny the fundamental truth. Humanity had become a galactic power overnight. We're not just a species that survived, Marcus told Emily during a quiet moment of reflection. We're a species that fundamentally changes the rules of engagement. The recovered Krell historical archives revealed something even more profound. Humanity was not the first civilization to challenge their computational supremacy, but they were the first to succeed. The first to demonstrate that technological superiority meant nothing against true adaptive potential. Scientific conferences across multiple star systems began to study humanity's approach. How had they transformed every limitation into a potential strength? How had they created technologies that could adapt faster than they could be analyzed? As the first year after the conflict concluded, humanity found itself in a unique position. No longer just a potential threat to be eliminated, they were now a civilization that had fundamentally challenged the understanding of technological conflict. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity was just getting started.